interview for House District 26. The goal of this interview is to get to know the both of you a little bit and decide who we're going to endorse. So we'll be asking a few questions. There's no intention on my part to be rude, but I may interrupt occasionally in order to keep us moving. We have 4 of these today, another 6 tomorrow. So if I seem curt, it's not anything personal. It's purely trying to keep the flow of the day going. We don't guarantee equal time, so that means that we may concentrate a little bit more on one of you than the other, and that's, again, not actually any indication of which way we're going to endorse, but simply trying to understand where you stand on a particular issue. We ask that you be polite to each other, and we'll be doing this for about the next 30 to 40 minutes, and very eager to get to know both of you. Representative Niren, would you start us off by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about your background and experience, and if you don't mind, could you also tell us the parameters of your district?
Oh, absolutely. I'm Courtney Niren, and I am the state representative currently for House District 26. The current parameters from the district are Wilsonville to Hillsborough along the urban growth boundary, so including the communities of King City, part of Tigard, Sherwood, Wilsonville. And then it currently extends, again, all the way out to Hillsborough. Going forward, it shrunk significantly, and it will be just the Bull Mountain part of Tigard, unincorporated Washington County, Sherwood, King City, and Wilsonville, where I live. And so in terms of introduction, I'm Courtney Niren. I taught high school French and Spanish until 2018, and my experience in the classroom really informed my desire to make significant policy changes that can help support our education system. I have worked in underfunded classrooms, and frankly were the same classrooms I went to high school at Tigard High School in the 90s. So really saw over time how the disinvestment in our schools directly impacted a place I know and love dearly. So in 2018, I pivoted and I ran for House District so that we could make sure that we had an advocate in the legislature fighting for strong public schools. And I'm incredibly proud to say that in that first term, we were able to pass the Student Success Act, which is already now providing needed funding for things that we know our schools need, whether it's wraparound services, mental health supports, smaller class sizes, and the funding that our schools have been talking about. Not a complete picture or not a complete answer, but definitely the right direction. So in terms of the current state, running again for a third term, I ran during the pandemic in a virtual setting in 2020, and running for my third term to continue the work and continue building on these relationships and the policy knowledge that I've gained to try to continue delivering for our schools and keep leading our education system in the right direction. There's a lot of work to do, as we know, and I'm really grateful that I have a great team to work with in the House, and would love to answer your questions today. Thank you for having us both.
Yeah. Redistricting, did it change the voter registration on your district in any way?
The redistricting actually kind of stayed fairly stable. Our district has approximately a third non-affiliated, approximately a third Democrat, and approximately a third Republican, with a significant number of independent voters as well. The independent party is growing, and our district is actually a part of that for sure. A lot of interest in the party. I believe it's increasing interest, but also we gained a lot of independent voters with redistricting.
So it's a fairly evenly divided district, I take it.
More or less.
Yeah. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Jason Fields. I'm a lifelong Oregonian, born and raised in Portland. My parents married when my mother was 15 years old and my father was 18 years old. We were incredibly poor. My siblings that I have, we were in and out of foster care for years, and I'm an unlikely person to be sitting here today. But at 9 years old, I started picking berries, and at 14 years old, I got my first job washing dishes, and I paid the rent. My parents had divorced second time by this time, and so I paid the rent at 14 years old, and Unfortunately, my father was going through a bout of depression. He was going through a bout of alcoholism, and he was unable to hold a job. And we got through it. My dad got remarried. Things got better for us. We moved to Milwaukee. I ended up graduating from Rex Putnam High School in 1988. It makes me 52 years old. And I worked all the way through high school, by the way. When I turned 18, I moved out of our home, and I purchased a home. I met a gal, and we got married. I had a daughter. I have a daughter, and I worked 2 full-time jobs so that my wife could stay home with my daughter, because I know from personal experience what happens when you leave your kids with bad people. And so here I am today, 52 years old. I own a couple of small businesses.
What are your businesses?
I manufacture sheet metal parts for Volkswagen Bugs and buses. I ship them right back to Germany, and I ship them all over the world as well. I also sell new and used tow trucks, which is something that I've done for the last 12 years. I actually used to I used to work just a few blocks from here selling printing, which I did that for about 13 and a half years. And that was a fabulous job. I was a young man, never had any sales experience other than selling Volkswagen parts and being a VW mechanic. But I got a great opportunity to sell printing as a young guy. So
Great.
yeah. So
Why are you running?
So here's the thing. I will tell you this. I never dreamed that I was going to be running for office. This was never a dream of mine. It's not something that I wanted. But I will tell you here about in October of last year, I decided I wanted to get involved. I hated every time I watched the news. I was constantly screaming at our TV set. And I decided I was going to get involved. And so I decided to start attending Republican meetings. And next thing you know, they asked me if I would consider becoming a PCP, a precinct committee person. And of course I said sure. Not long after that, I was asked if I would consider being the budget chair for the Republican Party of Yamhill County. And of course I agreed to that. Then I was contacted by the commissioners in Yamhill County, and they asked me, would you consider being on the budget committee for Yamhill County? And I said, sure, I'd be interested in doing that. And then one night, my wife and I, a few months later, my wife and I were watching television, having a nice glass of wine, and I got a text from somebody asking me if I could talk about politics. And they said, and of course I immediately called them on the phone. I said, absolutely. And he says, we need a really great person to run for House District 26, the coordinator on here sits and represents. And I said, I'm going to have to talk to my wife about this. So I hung the phone up, and I spoke to my wife, and she says, you know what? I want no part of this. I want no part of this. If you want to do this, that's your deal. I don't want to be in the limelight, but I will stand behind you in whatever you want to do. We hung up the phone, I got back on the phone. I told the person that asked me if I would do it. I said, absolutely, I'm interested in doing it. So my wife told me, she said, the reason why I do not want you to do this is because you're going to win. So there you go. So here we are. I will tell you that I have been running since, I believe, March. Maybe it's May. Or it's March, because May 17th is when the primary was. So I've been running since March, and in this time I have knocked on more than 12,000 doors. I have all but shut down my businesses so that I could do this job. And in my 12,000 doors, I have spoken with Democrats, independents, non-affiliated voters, and Republicans. And what I have found is that we all agree on the same things. We agree on much more than we disagree on. But the things that we absolutely agree on is Oregon is too expensive to live in. We all agree that we have got to do something to help our kids, okay? And then we've got to do something about safety in the state of Oregon.
Great, and that's a great place to pause for a minute. We're going to jump down into some specifics of policy. So, Representative Neron, can you point to a bill that you introduced in the 2 sessions or 4 sessions? How many sessions have you
Quite a few sessions if you include all of the emergency.
In the 4 years, two terms. Can you point me to a bill that you introduced and passed that you're most proud of?
I want to highlight the work that we've done in the space of childcare. We know, as Jason has highlighted as well, that the cost of living for families is untenable. And one of the main costs that our young families and families with young children are facing is childcare. We know that every county in Oregon is a childcare desert. This is pre-COVID, and that our childcare sector was especially hard hit during the pandemic. In the 2021 session, we passed House Bill 3073, which merged structuring the Department of Early Learning and Care with one of my bills that I had introduced to reform the employment-related daycare program. We capped co-pays at 7%, so now we're already seeing the benefits of that our families are no longer paying some of the highest co-pays in the nation. They're capped now at 7%, and it's much more affordable. We've streamlined the eligibility, and we've also stabilized eligibility. So no longer is it tied to a parent's employment, it's tied to the child. So the child now has care regardless of if the parent keeps their job or is between jobs.
So the copay cap was your bill? Just to make it clear.
Yeah, the employment-related daycare was a bill that I introduced with partners advocating in that space as well,
Right.
but one that I'm very connected to. In my own story, I went back to work when I had access to childcare and preschool for my own son. And so those, when we talk about workforce challenges as well, access to childcare gets parents back to work. And so I've experienced that and really wanted to make sure that we have that for more families. So I would highlight that bill.
Great. Mr. Fields, what's the first bill you're going to introduce?
Well, the first thing that I want to do is stop the tolls. That's the first thing that I want to do. This is going to impact the lives of every single Oregonian that lives in the Portland metro area. When you have something like the tolls, it's going to cost the average citizen that has to use these freeways to get to and from work is going to cost them $240 per month per person. Okay? Now I want you to think about how in the heck is somebody supposed to be able to afford fuel. I don't know if you guys have gone to a fast food restaurant. Okay, I went to Taco Bell yesterday. For me to feed my face was $12 for 2 burritos and a Pepsi. All right? So here's the thing. The only way you get a discount on these tolls is if you make $27,000 or less. If you get a job at Taco Bell where I bought those burritos, starting wage, it differs from store to store, but $17.50 per hour. That's $35,000 per year. How in the heck is somebody supposed to be able to afford this? So, I want to stop it. And here's the thing. The goal of these tolls is to get poor people out of their cars. That's the goal, is to get people off the road. The people that they're going to disproportionately affect are going to be our poorest, are the very poorest among us, our young citizens, our elderly, our young families with children, and our small businesses. And I think it's a bad idea.
So where's the money going to come from then?
Okay, so every 2 years you take your car through DEQ. Every 2 years your car sails through DEQ. We no longer test emissions on vehicles when we take them through DEQ. It is a complete money and time suck. I would do the same thing that Washington State did several years ago. They eliminated vehicle emissions testing. However, there's a fee associated when you take your car through DEQ. I would keep that fee and use that fee for whatever it is that we think we need roads or the money for, okay? By doing this, it doesn't harm a group of people based on where they live, okay? Instead, what it does is it allows everybody to share equally in this, all right? The other thing that I would consider doing is, I listened to Garrett. He's the guy in charge of the toll program. He says, well, the problem that we have here is we don't have enough people paying into fuel, we don't paying for state and federal taxes with their fuel because we have all these electric cars. Well, you know what? I think it's about time maybe the electric cars start paying their fair share. If they're going to use our roads, they should have, and by the way, he said, well, that's coming actually. This wasn't my idea. He says it's coming. There will be a per mileage tax, okay? The problem is they want to charge us to people who drive gasoline cars. You can't charge us state and federal taxes. Then they want to charge us for the tolls. Then they want to charge us for a per mileage tax. In Oregon, we are already one of the top 5 most expensive states to live in. Where does it end? And
All right.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
trying to keep us moving. I got the bill. Understood.
Got it.
I'm interested in your response on tolling. Where do you stand on tolling of interstate highways?
I appreciate that. I want to acknowledge that many of the things that my opponent has shared are shared concerns. And as a legislator, I have joined a bipartisan and bicameral group of legislators. Our Clackamas County Caucus has been active in this space for years. We have joined together. I co-authored a letter that we sent to the Oregon Transportation Commission stating our opposition to the 205 tolling project. Recently, ODOT revealed a plan that included the Boone Bridge as well, and I have since stated many times to them, ODOT directly, my opposition to this. We do not need to, this particular plan, I should say, we should not be asking neighborhoods to shoulder interstate infrastructure disproportionately. In my time in the legislature, I've advocated for investments in the Boone Bridge to get it shovel ready for federal dollars. We have not been able to complete that funding from a federal level or a state general fund. We had an amendment a couple sessions ago to direct dollars to some of these bridges that need infrastructure improvements as well, and we're not able to get that passed. Right now, they're looking at rolling out our area, our region, disproportionately would be tolled early, and essentially kind of the guinea pig for the project. What we need to do is acknowledge that the costs of living in our area are already high, and what we have is people that are being displaced because other costs of living, not just driving, are expensive. So if somebody works, for example, at Swire Coca-Cola, and they're not able to, they've been priced out of housing in Wilsonville, they might live in Donald. Now that individual might get taxed to come back into work.
Right.
This is incredibly regressive because this individual is looking for a place that's affordable to live, which also intersects with our conversations about affordable housing, which we also, as a member of the Housing Committee, would love to talk about that as well. But in this particular instance, this plan does not equitably roll out for the region, and yet it's a regional and interstate benefit that I believe our area needs to make sure that we're standing up as the Clackamas County Caucus of Legislators, that I'm standing up for my district to continue opposing anything that inequitably tolls and disproportionately tolls our region when the entire Portland metro region and interstate infrastructure benefits from these roads that move and frankly do need replacement because both are seismically unsound. The water for Charbonneau is attached to the Boone Bridge, which we know is on wooden pylons, for example. So these are pieces of infrastructure that we actually have to have a solid plan to replace.
Okay, so sounds like that's a no on the tolling.
The current ODOT plan is unfair.
Okay. What would you replace it with?
I do believe that our communities who are leaning in need to be brought to the table, and that our community members have offered a lot of suggestions. I alone cannot decide what needs to happen instead, but I do believe that we could do a wider regional program or carve out certain areas that would be disproportionately impacted. I want reassurances that our lowest income vulnerable Oregonians are not going to be hit with tolls when they're trying to make ends meet and put food on the table. We do need to talk about alternatives. The Oregon Transportation Commission, JPAC, our Transportation Committee, and our local jurisdictions all need to be brought in. But right now, what we're experiencing is, submitting testimony. I've submitted testimony and not heard back. We've submitted letters and not heard back. We need that communication to flow, and I've called on ODOT multiple times to improve communication, to bring in our community members, and to work with the leadership that's elected and representative, as well as the local neighbors and businesses that would be heavily impacted from a disproportionate early toll on this area.
Sure. Which endorsement have you received that you are most proud of? I'm going to ask you the same question in a second.
There are two that I think are really core to this particular piece of legislation. Both are public health crises. Both are intersect with health and safety. And those are the Pro-Choice Oregon Planned Parenthood set of endorsements, as well as Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action. We have to acknowledge that we have a long ways to go to make sure that individuals have safe communities, and emphasis on what we can do at the legislature in terms of gun safety cannot be understated. We've got a responsibility to act, and as well as protect a person's right to choose their own reproductive health care.
Great. Same question.
You know what, I'll tell you what. My favorite endorsement that I've received is probably from Mary Starrett and Lindsay Burschauer, and they are Yamhill County Commissioners. And the reason why is because I think these people love their communities more than anybody could possibly love their communities. And I'm so honored to be represented by them and to have them endorse me.
They're modestly controversial figures down there, aren't they?
Everybody could be. They are.
Well,
they
sure,
could
yeah.
be. Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, but I want to talk about something here. Nothing has changed on our tolls. Nothing has changed since the time that it was introduced until now. Okay. As far as 205 being as part of the tolling, this isn't a new idea. I want you to consider something. If we are trying to get our poorest out of their cars, because this is who is going to be affected the worst, okay? If we're trying to get the poorest among us out of their cars, it makes them even more poor, all right? Mobility brings prosperity. If you're going to have to take public transportation wherever you go, you will be limited to where you can work and how you're going to be able to provide for your families. You will be limited because you're going to have to spend so much time of your life in public transportation. In Oregon, public transportation does not work. It works for Portland Metro, okay? We're outside of that. It does not work where we live.
Do you agree that public transportation doesn't work in Wilsonville and Tigard and unincorporated Washington County?
I want to start with, we are inside Portland Metro, and we have improvements that we need to make with our transportation infrastructure. Wilsonville has benefited from free busing inside the city limits, and so I have 4 bus stops within a block of my house. I could hop on at any given time and be at the grocery store and back. And our neighborhood was built with those bus stops in them. We need to rethink how we are embedding public transportation into our communities. This particular part of our district is served well by this smart busing program. There's a moratorium on such programs, so we don't necessarily have the robust TriMet presence that's in downtown Portland. And I would argue that in the outskirts of the Portland metro area, on our urban growth boundary edge, we do have major improvements that we need to make. Sherwood residents do not choose to take public transportation because they're not sure when the next bus back will be. So we need to talk about better service throughout our communities. On Bull Mountain, for example, there's an individual who is outside of a mile of bus stops, which means that TriMet Lyft does not serve his house. As a paraplegic, that means he's housebound if he has nobody coming to his particular residence. I spoke with a woman in low-income housing in unincorporated Washington County who walks 1.5 miles to the closest bus stop and says that her diabetic alarm is going off on a regular basis as she tries to get to her bus. That is too far for somebody who's living in low-income housing to have to go to the nearest bus stop. As we build our newest and potentially one of our largest affordable housing projects in developments in the district. It's going to be right next to Mountainside High School. It's going to bring in 167 units, I believe, 80 of which will be allocated for low-income seniors on fixed income, and 10% will be for deeply affordable low-income housing. This development has been in partnership with community-based organizations, the City of Beaverton, and a developer who really has a conscience and is bringing in those partnerships to serve the needs of that particular community. So he's doing it in partnership with the libraries, with food providers, with transit providers. So as we bring in new development, we have got to be planning for not only our cars and our roads to be functioning and strong, but also our options for individuals who do not have car-centered lifestyles. In Wilsonville, for example, we're building a transit-oriented development, and I was also able to bring in money for that project. On the ground floor of that project will be services, potentially the food bank, potentially a childcare, and co-located with the bus station. This transit-oriented development will be at the transit center in Wilsonville at the end of the West Line, and uniquely, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments for individuals that is the lifestyle that they might choose, and it will be at workforce housing rates. So we need to make sure that we're thinking about how are we serving, how are we connecting, because there are so many ways that infrastructure gets people to where they want to go, whether it's education infrastructure, childcare infrastructure, road infrastructure, or mass transportation infrastructure. Everybody has a different lifestyle, and what we need to offer is choice and choices that match the needs of the community.
Great. Lucas, you got any questions?
Yeah.
May I just say something real
please.
fast? Okay, so I agree with much of what she said. However, we didn't talk about ridership. It is true they have electric buses in Wilsonville, and that is a wonderful thing, okay? But you know what, I'll tell you something. I am on the budget committee for Yamhill County. Okay, and the same thing is going on in Wilsonville that's going on in Yamhill County. Yamhill County's budget is $5.8 million. If you have a business and you're trying to make sure that you stay afloat, the very least that you can bring in is $5.8 million. Okay, so you break even. The amount of dollars that come in Yamhill Transit is $175,000. Okay, that is the total. Sometimes I think we should reconsider this whole bus idea. $5.8 million. Think how we could spend that money somewhere else. And I'm not saying take away rides for seniors and disabled persons and young persons, but think about, I'm just throwing crazy ideas out there. But imagine if we could partner with Uber, okay? Imagine partnering with Uber where you eliminate all the buses that we have in specifically Yamhill County, all right? And now, when a senior citizen needs a ride, they get a free ride. Somebody comes to their door, they pick them up at their door, they take them directly to their location that they want to go to, the grocery store, whatever. They get their groceries, they have their ride that goes exactly right back to their house. No cost to them. Zero cost.
Why do you think that would be cheaper for the county than the current Lyft program?
Oh, for as far as Wilsonville? Or if we're talking about Yamhill County. Well, imagine if you don't have a cost of $5.8 million and the ridership is $175,000.
So you want TriMet funding it rather than...
Say again?
You want the funding to come from TriMet rather than...
I don't want TriMet to have any part of Yamhill County for sure. I'm talking specifically about Yamhill Transit, and I'm talking about thinking of other ideas to have transportation for our elderly and people that need this type of transportation.
And one specific, this is on a totally different subject, but one specific question I want for you. Like, would you support any gun control legislation? Like, is there any
Absolutely.
gun control? What would it look like?
Well, I'll tell you what. You know what? Courtney Neron actually, I looked at something that she wanted to pass, and you know what? I think it was a good bill, and it was actually a bill in which if you had made a credible threat to a church or a school, that you would serve time. However, I wish that instead of it being a 364-day in jail, instead it would be a felony where you're going to spend years in jail and a much larger fine. As far as I'll tell you another thing, okay? So this last year, I want you to know, first of all, I believe in common sense gun laws. If you guys are beating the crap out of your wife or your husband's beating the crap out of you or whatever, I totally believe that you should not own a gun. On the other hand, we just passed a law this last year that requires you to keep your gun in a safe, unloaded, and you must keep your ammunition someplace else. Now, if somebody breaks in your house, how in the heck is that supposed to work out for you? It's not going to. On the other hand, I'll tell you something else. I know plenty of people that have always kept a gun in the side of in the pocket on their couch. And I truly believe that person ought to be liable if they know that a young kid comes in their house and uses that gun in some type of accident or even a malicious matter. I think that's common sense. You know, that's a common sense thing to a law. You know what I mean? That would be common sense.
Would you support permits?
Permits?
Yeah, requiring a permit to purchase a gun.
A permit to purchase a gun?
Yeah,
No, absolutely. No, I would not permit. I would not support a permit to purchase a gun. Why would you want it? Why would a person who is a law-abiding citizen require a permit to purchase something they already have a constitutional right to purchase? I do believe absolutely in background checks. I do believe that if you're a person that say that you're between maybe the age of 18 and 25 years old, I do believe that that there should be maybe some kind of gun safety training that you have to take. I think
How's that different than a permit?
A permit?
Yeah.
Permit? Well, if you're going to require me at 52 years old to purchase a permit so that I can purchase a gun, absolutely not.
But you would support requiring gun safety training in order to purchase a gun?
For certain ages, yes.
Representative Neering, any thoughts on gun control?
Absolutely. I was an early endorser of Measure 114. I absolutely believe that we need to improve our gun laws and make our communities safer with permit to purchase, with the limitations on magazine size, and make sure that we have closed the loopholes in our background checks. We absolutely know that those are things that could improve safety. As a teacher, I will never forget second period on February 14th, 2018, when a student looked at me and said it happened again, and I didn't know what they were talking about, and they told me all about what had just happened in Parkland. And the fear that our schools experience, that our students experience, is absolutely avoidable. This is an epidemic that's unique to our country, and that we have to act with the information we have to do better. I want to appreciate the support for my threats of mass harm bill. We are bringing that back in the coming legislative session, and we have a work group that is coming together to make sure that we have the support we need, and that we've polished it in ways that can really truly serve to fill the gap that currently exists between menacing and disorderly conduct. We have a crime that makes a false threat against the law, but we don't have a crime that makes a true threat against the law. So we're going to be filling that gap, and that is something that has ideally bipartisan support. So thank you for that. I do want to just alert, though, there have been a couple different data points thrown out that are not necessarily solidified relative to tolling and that particular bill. So I'm not sure where you got the 364 days. So
Data points. What are you
well, you
talking
said
about?
364 days. So I just want to
it
say
says it right in the bill.
there are things that are going to be brought forward in the upcoming session that will look different, and we're polishing up with partnership from many different organizations who also care about that gap in the law.
I'm afraid that we've reached our time. So,
Are you kidding me?
Not at all. 40 minutes.
We didn't talk about anything that I want to talk about.
You've talked about a great many things. Let's ask the last question.
Yes.
Which is our fun question.
Okay.
You're having your last meal. What's the one food that has to be in your last meal?
Oh my
I've had people say corn on the cob, and people say ice cream. What's the one food item that you've got to have?
Strawberries.
Excellent choice.
Artichoke straight from the garden.
Nice. I'm sorry we can't take more time, but both of you have been incredibly engaging. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Wish you the best.
Like